Hey guys, so here I am with Paul and he's going to show us his car. So Paul, what do we have here?
So here we have a 1945 Type 82 Kubelwagen, which was built at the very end of the war, just before the final collapse in March 45. It was built roughly, I can tie it down to between the 10th and the 11th of February, actually, sorry is the date. It's between the 10th and the 11th. Somebody said the 14th, but in around that they were built in batches. So that's as far as I can date the car.
Yes.
She probably would have been a tan all over, but I have her actually sprayed in the kind of German camouflage, which is the rock brown and the green, which is more kind of Normandy colours. But probably that's at the end, at that stage of the war, they were just tan. But they may have sprayed it, it depends. I couldn't find any traces of camouflage on it, so I reckon it was all tan. A couple of features on that one is on the earlier cars and the later cars, they went back to just this plain hook system on the front. There was no front bumper bar, which was on the mid-war cars from a 43 on. They paired it back to the bare essentials at the end of the war.
I assume they just weren't running out of parts at that stage.
That was the main reason. Well, they put together whatever they come. You sometimes get some 45 cars, guys were asking, they have these folding hooks from the Wagon. But that was only because they were in the factory at the time. That was the only parts that they actually had. Technically, I shouldn't really have a no-tech on mine either, because that stage of the war, they weren't bothered to put them on. But again, something like that could be fitted in the field or in a workshop. But because it was so late at the end of the war, this one probably didn't see a lot of service. You know, it's very hard to track where they actually went, because they all went to the railhead in Kassel, and then they were shipped from there onto their the front lines on Germany would have been, you know, it depends where the front line would have been. So it probably wouldn't have seen a lot of service.
And can you just tell me very quickly, what is this piece here?
These things are no-tech. It's a blackout light, and they have a corresponding light fitted on the back. So it was for driving in convoy at night. So your main headlights would be off, and just this headlight would be on, which would just shine a beam on the ground.
It's just barely enough light just to see.
I don't think you'd really see much. If I show you the back of the car, you would that's your no-tech corresponding light on the back, which had these lights on here. So basically, for convoy driving, for the guy behind you, he's in total blackness. If he sees two lights, don't get me wrong, I think it was, I suppose, 100 metres back, you could actually see the lights. And the closer you got, the more lights you saw, you know how close you were to the vehicle.
Ah, yes.
So they have blackout lights today for convoy driving, but these were specifically to all German vehicles, had these lights on them. And then when they weren't being used during the daytime, that flap went up. And then you just had these lights at the back. There was no brake. That was another thing. A lot of Kubels, you see them with these two lights on here. Now that's from an American, breakdown of the vehicle, and a lot of people restore them with that, which is incorrect. They should either just have one here and that's it. 45, they've no brake lights.
And just very quickly, so this one here is red and this one here is orange.
Yeah.
They're obviously not indicators.
No, they're not. They're just lights. Again, it's to do with the blackout system. I'm not 100% sure on that. Yeah. Why one was red and one was orange. They're not brake lights because she doesn't have a brake light on her.
And the number plate here, obviously the SS.
Well, I did it as SS. It's again, you can't tell at that stage of the war. The SS had control of most economic places, including Wolfsburg. They were guards there at it. And most of these cars at that stage of the war were built by prisoners of war, Russian prisoners of war and slave labour. So this is the interior. So that's your fuel tank over there. So that R, what looks like a T in the middle, and then the Z and L. So A is off, reserve, and Zug is on. Now that's controlled by underneath. You'll see a little lever underneath. So that's your petrol tank. Then you have your dash here, which is the later style dash. On early Kubelwagens they had an oval one with two fuse boards. This they put it all into one because it was simpler to make, just a pressed out plate. Yeah. So that was pretty simple on that. Then moving up to here, that's the control for the blackout lights. That's your control button for that. Then up above that, that's your motor wiper for your motors. And on 45 cars, they only had one. They deleted.
That's right. I was about to say there's only one on this.
One. Again, it was all cutbacks. Yeah. That was all it was. Then inside of the pedals.
They even cut back on the roof.
Well, it was a canvas roof on all of them. They all had a canvas roof.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. The other feature there is, you see down here, you've got your pedals, obviously your clutch and your brake and your accelerator. You see the hole there. Well, that hole there would have been originally would have been a high-low beam. Again, another component was cut out. It was unnecessary come the end of the war, so they just deleted it.
And in terms of chassis, so this is are we saying that this is basically a Beetle or like the very early German Beetle?
It would be an early German Beetle chassis. The chassis didn't really change too much from the start of the war to the end of the war. There wasn't a lot of difference on the chassis. It would have fitted the enclosed top model as well. But obviously a different configuration inside. Again, it was all just pressed out steel.
Yeah. And in terms of these parts that you have inside the car?
Yeah, again, I just put on 2. These are welded on. Normally they went on a bracket system where there was 4, but again, I put these on myself. But again, a field shop manufacturer could have put them on just to hold rifles or whatever. It would have been a field modification. It was on a 45 car, they wouldn't have had them at all.
Yeah.
There would have, again, shortage or whatever they had.
So this here is obviously a bag, is it?
Yeah, it's what they call it. It's a standard German Army bread bag.
Yeah.
And then
that's your
the
food.
water bottle, and then a helmet just strung on the back there, just to give it a bit of atmosphere. And then you have your
this piece here?
Panzerfaust.
And this was
that was used in the film Fury. It's just one of the film props.
Brilliant.
But that was what they had for destroying a tank, knocking out a tank. The seats are kind of a tan colour. The earlier ones were black. These are made by a restorer in the Czech Republic, and they're very close to the original seat covers, what they would have looked like.
And you have brilliant camouflage already just for the day.
A few branches, because most vehicles, anything that moved during the daytime, the Allies ruled the skies in Germany at the end of the war, so anything that moved, if it was at night time, they'd be safe enough. But generally anything during the daytime, no matter what it was, from a horse and cart to a person walking, could be strafed by the...
Yes. And you have a few bits of writing here on the different sides.
These are, well, they're obviously tyre pressures. What's your tyre pressures?
1.8 bar.
Yeah.
1.8 bar at the front and 1.4 at the front.
And this stamping on here is for the railroad. This was to give weight and stuff like that. It's more for the railways. That was stamped on that. They put these in box cars, where you could have 4 in a box car. 2 on the bottom, and then they put planking on the top, and another 2 could have sat on top, because they were right beside the rail, came into the works, and they were taken out that way as well in Wolfsburg, or at the time it was KdF Stadt was the actual factory.
And everything on this is just pressed steel. It's single skinned as well.
There's no armour on it. No, it's not. They're just a light. The weight on them, I think, is about 740 kilograms. I mean, in around that.
But it's better to be light and fast than heavy and slow.
Well, it had no 4-wheel drive.
Yeah.
So with these, the idea of that was like going across mud and snow. It was quite light. And even in the desert, they liked them because they had a long range with their fuel. They'd no water because they're air cooled. So that was a great advantage. I think if you read the memoirs of Rommel had 2, I think an Alfa Romeo and another large car, his staff cars, but one of them was being repaired, so he used his Kubel one day and they drove through a minefield and out the other side.
Wow.
And they only realised, because of the lightness of this, Rommel remarked, if I wasn't in the Kubel, he said I would have been 2 miles up in the sky, blown to pieces, because his own car, the weight of it would have triggered a mine. So the only disadvantage, I think, with Russia, they'd so little protection. They only had a canvas roof on them, so they were pretty useless in the Russian campaign. But they ranged from the early war all over the theatre of Europe. They were used by the Germans, down into the Balkans, into Greece, into Russia. Everywhere the Germans invaded, they obviously had them. And then that was it. They ceased to exist then at the end of the collapse, 45, until the British moved into the plant. They built a few of them again, but with whatever they had, specification-wise, they changed a few things on the back. I'll show you here. They were void of these no-tech lights, and they just had a central light on them here. Yeah. Earlier cars also had metal pieces that came out here, and your registration plate would be mounted out here to the side. But due to war restrictions, they changed these spacers on the boot and left them blank here, that it was actually just painted on, again to save metal. Anything to save metal.
Exactly, because every resource was so valuable.
Yeah. They also found during the Desert War these grills. They had a lot of problem with dust and that getting into the carburetors during the desert combat when they were in Libya. So they actually fitted like a kind of a metal, almost looks like a bath, that was fitted onto this.
Oh, like a shroud, is it?
Like a shroud that covered them. You'll see some of them with a shroud. And what happened there was, it stopped dust and stuff getting into them. But again, come 45, metal shortages, things like that, might have left the shroud off. I didn't have a shroud on this one, so just have the ordinary. Even though it has the fittings for the shroud to go onto, the holes drilled for a shroud to fit. There's no fitting on the bonnet. But this was restored, so I actually restored it to what.
And when you got this car originally, how much of it was there, and how much did you have to fabricate, or how much did you have to source and find?
It was as is, but it was restored to an early car, which was wrong. It had a lot of features that I had to take off to put back to a 45 model. It's in my room, or there's a small tub in my car.
So Paul, thanks very much for the interview and for showing me your car.
You're very welcome, thank you.